I play Sabina Spielrein, who was a patient of Dr. Jung. She was the first patient that he used what was called the talking cure on, which was a theory, a kind of method that Freud had come up with. She's suffering from what is diagnosed as hysteria, so she's having hysterical episodes. That strange line in playing her of getting this creature that was very difficult, that was very intense and could be horrendous to people, and yet always playing it with that idea that she's ill and that she is, of course, a victim. And she thinks that she is a devil. She thinks she's vile, filthy, and corrupt. So I sort of wanted something facially that expressed that. A huge part of it is the costumes. So it was great that we kind of managed to find something that just made her sort of, she's never fussy, she's never perfectly of that period, because, you know, I sort of going along that, if you think you're disgusting, if you think you're that vile, you don't dress yourself up and have the hair done and have everything else, because you don't want people to look at you because you're disgusting. There were various rumours at the time of that Jung was having this affair with this patient and student, and he got very freaked out by it, so he denied everything. She was absolutely besotted with him, and she sort of believed that he was the saviour, and that she'd have this child that would be a hero by him. And, you know, so I think, yes, it was a love. Maybe not completely sane love, but certainly it was love. It was quite terrifying, actually, because, you know, I first read the script and went, God, this is amazing, and sort of said yes to doing it, and then went, oh, this is really difficult. Wow, how do I? So I started with the book that Christopher Hampton based the original play on, called The Dangerous Method, and I started. I didn't understand a word, because, you know, it's all in psychoanalytical talk, and I didn't know anything about it. David said to me, sort of, you know, how do you feel about doing a touch of Russian in there? And I was kind of, I love doing accents. I was like, yeah, great, perfect. And then he said, okay, specifically, I want mid-Atlantic with a Russian blush. I was so excited when he said he'd play Freud. I think he's the most phenomenal actor, and really exciting that he gets to do something, because you wouldn't think of Viggo Mortensen that Freud, you know. I mean, but the characterization's wonderful, and actually, because I love it when people, I mean, I do love it when people do research, and I love hearing about all the stuff that they've found out. So it was a joy to the one scene that we did together, you know, to kind of go, oh wow, what books have you been reading? And he's written me a whole list of Freud books, because I didn't get around to reading any biographies of Freud, so I've got a whole list of, and you know they're going to be good. If Viggo's read them and he thinks they're good, you know they're going to be good. What I found fascinating about the whole story was that it was the beginning of psychoanalysis. It's so much a part of our culture, and even sort of words like ego or complex or anything like that, it's words that we don't think about using today. Whereas then it was right at the beginning, and they were discovering a whole new way of treating people. It's fabulous. I've loved reading all the books. I've loved how difficult I found it. It's been a real challenge. Loved doing the accent, you know, and the whole kind of the diving in aspect of it. David Cronenberg, he goes, yes, I believe that you can do this. And you go, okay. And somehow you do. And it's incredibly exciting. So it's the arduousness and the difficulties, you know, it makes you feel alive.
I play C.G. Jung, and I kind of play him during the time that he spent at the Berkholzi hospital, and to just sort of a few years after he left the hospital and started to work from his home, Kusnacht. So I think it spans from about 1902 to 1913. The words that we use today, introvert and extrovert, I mean, they're sort of things that we take for granted now, but back then, people didn't really think of that or sort of comprehend it. It was sort of like everybody moved as one lump, whereas he had this idea that you need to find yourself as an individual before you finally can sort of access your full potential. The fact of the matter is that he was just sort of open to really kind of anything, whereas Freud was very much set in one sort of form of psychology, this idea that all neurosis essentially springs from a sexual origin. And I think Jung has a problem with that. Jung looked up to Freud so much, but he's the next. It's kind of like Freud's own philosophy, he's going to kill the father and take over. I think that for somebody like Jung, who was so ambitious and so driven, I think with both these characters, Freud didn't like to be questioned. She's troubled mentally, when she first arrives at the hospital. But what sort of takes him aback is, she's extremely intelligent, and she's also extremely brave and open. And he's starting this sort of talking cure, which he's sort of taken from Freud and has been reading a lot about this form of psychoanalysis, as we call it now, which was then called psychoanalysis. And he starts to use her as a sort of litmus test for this talking cure. She's very responsive and she's very eager and also very honest with it. So I think her honesty and her intelligence and her strength and the fact that she's beautiful, I think, intrigues him and puts him off balance, really. Here comes somebody like Otto Gross, who was, extremely seductive and also very, very bright. He is clear, his notes are very precise. He doesn't give many notes. We don't do many takes. He's very clear about what he wants, and that sort of confidence then sort of spreads down throughout the set. He's just an absolute sort of joy, really, and he has got obviously his work very methodically sort of put together, and he's very precise. But he's also got a great sense of humor, and we sort of, we had a lot of fun doing our scenes together, and the more sort of we did, the more fun we had. And it's important as well, I think, when you're dealing with heavy material and very serious material, that you keep a lightness about yourself in between takes, so then you can come to the scene with and you're a bit more loose and you're a bit more relaxed, and you can find then the little nuances within it. Keira's, I would say, well, for me anyway, definitely got the hardest part to play in this. She goes through such a range of emotions and mental states, and from day one she came and she sat down in the seat and she just went for it, and she dives in head first, and she's super talented and just really easy to work with. They're just, human beings, and doing things to each other that we all do. And they have the same sort of lusts and jealousy. And, there's a lot at play here with these characters. They were brilliant people, but then, with that comes, egos as well. And with egos comes a lot of other personality traits, that show themselves in various ways. It always helps when I put on a costume. You know, you sort of do all your homework at home, and sort of, you know, you're in your sort of tracksuit bottoms or whatever, you know, barefoot, and then slowly, you know, when you put on the shoes and you start to wear the shoes that the character wears and all this sort of stuff, you know, and the people had little, you know, intricate little things, you know, that like this, you know, like this sort of pocket watch, and there's a real elegance about the time. If these two men did perhaps get over their sort of quite sizable egos, perhaps we would have seen a more rounded idea of psychology and the human sort of mind, and it would have been interesting if they just sort of continued and being allowed each of their sort of opinions to sort of play relevance.
I play Sigmund Freud, starting at age 50. It's a period of his life, in terms of the images we have of him, that people are not that familiar with. He looks quite serious, you know, but what you realize in reading about him, what his contemporaries said about him, and even reading his letters, the letters he exchanged with Jung, is that there's a very dry humor to him, you know, sort of a lot of times a deadpan humor, which has been really fun to play. Freud was very conscious of public perception of himself, of the science, and he wanted to keep things tidy. You know, he's a very formal, tidy person, in some sense, old-fashioned really. And Jung represents something new, more youthful. There's a different kind of energy, you know, even in reading their letters and the way that Freud wrote. He kept on dressing in the same way for decades, you know, really a 19th century way of dressing. And his German, he wrote in, you know, the way German was written in the 18th and 19th century, he never really changed it. So there's a formality to his writing and to his presentation of himself, but in conversation, he's witty and he's personable and he's rather easygoing, but there's always a high standard. While Jung is deferential, he's his own man, and I think Freud likes this for many reasons. You know, new blood, new ideas, someone to talk with on an equal level, to learn from. You see the basis of their quick and easy early friendship, but you also see this the basis of what later is, you know, their discord. Certainly, Sabina's Keira's character. In a way, she brings them closer together, but at the same time, she breaks up the relationship a bit. Not directly herself, but the effect of her relationship to Jung in particular. Freud did credit her for her ideas in writing, whereas Jung did not. And you know, you can definitely make a case for Jung having gotten some very important ideas from her. Michael's been really a good partner, really good to work with. I think we found amusing moments where it might not have been obvious that they were there. You know, they were there for the finding, and I think we've done well with it, and David has guided us. Keira has to go through some very traumatic, intense moments in this movie, you know, emotionally, mentally, physically. I mean, it's incredible. I'm really glad she's playing the part. I think she's going to surprise a lot of people. I mean, I did what I always do in one sense. I read everything I could possibly find that Freud had written, that others had written about Freud, what Jung had written, what they had written to each other, their letters, what Sabina had written, what her ideas were, how much credit she was given or not by Jung, by Freud. Stefan has done an amazing job of not making any kind of caricature, but helping me to look different, to look like this person. And then, of course, I have to fill it with a certain way of speaking, a certain body language, and all of those things. But he didn't, say to Stefan, you must make him do this, and you must make this look, or to work. I mean, he supervises all of it, just like he obviously watches every move we make, and you can feel that he doesn't miss anything. From take to take, he's watching every nuance. But there's a trust there, and trust inspires confidence. He's refined the art of movie making to the point where it looks deceptively easy. It's tranquil, people are having a laugh, they're having a good time. It's wonderful to work with him. It's great to be back working with him. There's no director that has a better process, both for the crew, for himself, and for the actors. The scene that we played today here in Vienna, and we were very fortunate, I think, to shoot in Berggasse, in Freud's actual house. He lived there from 1891 to 1938, so nearly 40, well, more than 40 years. And so those steps, those handrails, he's gone up and down those stairs many, many times. It was enjoyable to do that. It's about not so much, how bright they were and what pioneers they were. It's about the mistakes they made, how imperfect they were. That's where the passion is, that's where the emotion in the story is, and the humor.
My name is Otto Gross, and I'm actually a psychologist too, a pretty good one. But I'm really sick. I'm into drugs, and I have a lot of different relationship with a bunch of women. I have kids all over the place, and there's one line that really resumes what my character is all about. It's never repress anything, so he goes for whatever he feels like. I think Freud is sending me to see Jung to challenge him. I'm supposed to be cured by Jung, but at the end of the story, I wonder if, first of all, if I'm cured of anything. And plus, I think eventually the way Jung was thinking before he met Otto Gross was different. He's dark, he's mysterious, he's daring. I guess we're always a little bit attracted to dark sides, because it's forbidden, because it's a little dangerous. Most of the time, we don't allow ourselves to do things that are bad, even though we really want to, sometimes. The difference between Freud, Jung, and Otto Gross is that Otto Gross is actually, living his method. He goes for it, with no returning back. He's not scared. The idea of working with Viggo and David again was something I couldn't refuse anyways. And yeah, then the character is really is very modern. Actually, I can't really see him as a period character. He could have been, I don't know, the manager of the Rolling Stones in the '60s. You know. Well, the truth is that yeah, you have directors like David, of course, that if they're asking me to do something, my first reaction would be to say yes. But then you have to read the script and see where you can fit and what you can do with the character. He doesn't talk much. If it's fine, he won't say anything. And if something is wrong, he will always come up with something very precise and short to make you understand what he's looking for. It's pretty universal matters, what we're talking about. It's about sex, repression, trying to get rid of all the problems we had in our childhood, things like that. And I think it's very universal. So hopefully, if things go well, I think people will get everything that we're talking about.
These people were incredibly intellectual and charismatic and articulate. They were also very passionate, and their passion came through their articulation and their theories and their abstract thoughts, and really quite fascinating people, and a fantastic story. It was a mentoring relationship. Jung thought of Freud as his father figure, and in fact called him that many times in letters and so on. And so it was very intriguing to me to come across a story about Freud and Jung that also involved a woman who until the 1970s was very little known, named Sabine Spielrein, Jewish-Russian woman who was a patient of Jung's, with whom he had an affair, and then under his tutelage became interested in psychoanalysis, and then ultimately became a Freudian analyst and went to Freud. So it was a strange menage a trois. Not that she had any sexual relationships with Freud, but still there was love in each part of the triangle, including between Jung and Freud. There was incredible affection and friendship between them. And Sabine was sort of in the middle of that. Viggo is, he's fearless. I mean, once he's committed to do a role, there's nothing will stop him, from doing it immaculately and with great depth. Stéphane Dupuis, who won an Oscar for my movie The Fly that many years ago and has worked with me many times, and every morning he would cook up a new nose for Viggo, a Freud nose. But it's incredibly subtle. It's not an exaggerated thing. It's just enough to make Viggo not quite be Viggo. And for an actor, that's a gift as well. It allows him to disconnect from himself, his own physiology, and to become another person. I really felt that Michael was a gift, because once again, you need someone who, with that mustache, with the glasses, feels like Jung as we know him from at least still photographs of the period, and his bearing, and his use of language. And Michael was, I think it's really a magnificent, beautifully subtle performance that will, you hope people will recognize the range that Michael has. She's incredibly well prepared. I mean, immaculately well prepared. And you might think that someone who does that would be thrown by a sudden shift in exactly the way the scene is going to be shot and the dynamics of the scene, that you, instead of standing in the middle of a field speaking, you're in a pond with your hair wet, with mud all over you, that kind of thing. She loved it. She's just such more than a trooper. I mean, it wasn't as though she did it dutifully. She did it with great exuberance, and you can't buy that. I mean, it's just an actor really has that to give you or does not, and she really does. I must say I had the same experience working with her that I had first with Vigo, which is that I knew that she was good, but I didn't realize that she was brilliant, and she is brilliant. I mean, she is a brilliant actress. She's as good as any actress I've ever worked with, and I have worked with some of the best actresses in the world. Otto Gross was a physician who was being trained by Freud, and Freud at first thought that Gross was the one to lead everyone into the future of psychoanalysis because he was considered really, in a way, the most brilliant of them all, even more brilliant even than Jung, maybe even than Freud. But of course he had a fatal flaw, which was in a way that he was a hippie. I wanted the movie to be sensual and beautiful as well as intellectually stimulating. It's also funny because these men and women did have a sense of humor, and they were not hesitant to use it either on attack or for egotistical reasons and so on. There was a lot of sparring amongst this quartet of people. And it was a lot to deliver, but of course it was all there in Christopher Hampton's script, so up to the rest of us to realize it on screen. A period piece for a costume designer is exciting and terrifying, and especially once again when there are many photographs of Freud and Jung in the clothes that they would have worn at certain periods in their life, to replicate that. And it's a very subtle thing. I mean, my sister Denise has worked with me for many years, creating costumes for my movies, but I don't think we've ever done. Naked Lunch, in his own strange way, was from the 1940s and 50s, a period piece, but we've never. I think she's always wanted to do a massive period piece, and this movie is that, despite the fact that in some ways it's very intimate. I don't really know when I start making a film what the dynamics of it will be, and what scenes will catch fire and be sort of the scenes that people remember. You just know that they're very juicy. There's great texture, and these people are so interesting and intriguing, and their lives are so complex and passionate that you just know that along the way there's going to be sparks struck. And so there are actually many scenes, I must say. I mean, I think the movie has many scenes that certainly delight me and surprise me. And it will surprise people who think they know something about Freud and Jung.